Differences in family communication systems and patterns as a whole beg the question, how do communication patterns within families affect levels of individualism within adolescence? Family communication patterns contribute to the decline of individualism in adolescence because of the various types of communication as well as interpersonal relationships. Dr. Susan Edgar-Smith, Dean of the College of Education at Eastern University, defines individualism as each person as separate and unique, as solely responsible for his or her actions, thoughts, and is personally liable for the consequences of those actions. Family structure as a whole, as well as the structure of communication patterns within a family, greatly influence the adolescent's likelihood of exhibiting individualism. Dr. Edgar-Smith emphasizes that as adolescents become immersed in various cultures and traditions, it's significant to understand that they may develop values that differ from those of their parents or peers. Furthermore, according to Dr. Caitlin Phillips, Assistant Professor of Communication Studies and Philosophy at the University of Nebraska, the extent to which one feels a connection with their family group is identified as family identification. This connection between one and their family influences the overall effect between conformity and relational intentions. The likelihood of an adolescent changing their own opinions or thoughts to be the same as another individual is found to be associated with positive communication. Dr. Kathy Doe, a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Psychology and Philosophy at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, conducted a study focusing on the examination of how conformity decisions are evaluated in the developing brain, particularly when an adolescent's opinion differs from those of their parents or peers. Dr. Doe specifically chose early adolescents to be subjects of her study and required them to complete an experimental task during an MRI scan. They were instructed to indicate who they agreed with when their opinion conflicted with their parent or peer. Results of this study found that when deciding whether to conform, there was a lower frequency of conforming to negative communication over positive, meaning that positive influence is stronger than negative when trying to convince an adolescent to conform. Dr. Colin Hess, the director of the School of Communication at Arizona State University, reinstates the idea bolstered by Dr. Doe, conveying the concept of warm conformity behavior, where parents can communicate their ideas in a way that promotes warmth and closeness rather than rules and hierarchy. It has been found that interpersonal relationships within a family, such as siblings, also negatively affect levels of individualism in adolescence. Helen Lucy, faculty member at King's College at the University of London, specifically studied the intercommunication patterns within siblings. She found that as siblings go about their daily practices with their families and micro-practices of those family groups, they impact each other's emotional, spatial, and social horizons. Although it was found that siblings do observe and regulate each other within the household and outside, it was also found that the reverse can occur, and this often happens in sibling groups. Overall, Helen Lucy's study demonstrates the complexity and communicative dimensions between siblings, and the various relationships within families display the difficulty that comes with personality differences between these siblings and how one may conform just to satisfy the other. Similarly, in a study conducted by Dr. Elizabeth Dorrance Hall, director of the Family Communication and Relationship Lab at Michigan State University, it was found that sibling relationships are influenced both by the behaviors performed within that specific relationship as well as the family communication as a whole. Overall, relationships and individuality are influenced by various relationships within families. So it's important to understand that communication between adolescents is just as important as parent to adolescent communication. Dr. Leslie Bosch, a national board certified health and wellness coach, emphasizes that young adulthood is a crucial period of development time, and she highlights the importance of the further consideration of communication patterns within families. When researching conformity, not only is it important to focus on communication within the family, but also the age of the individual, in this case, adolescents, being most vulnerable to adhere to the ideas of others. The consideration of communication patterns within families is important when studying conformity within adolescence. Furthermore, it's important to understand that family structure plays a huge role in the possibility of an adolescent demonstrating individualism. Whether it's communication between adolescents or parents to adolescents, the probability of an adolescent conforming is influenced by communication patterns in general, as well as the type of communication. Although there is not a clear solution for conformity within families, having an in-depth understanding of the factors that contribute to the decline of individualism in adolescence is extremely important when determining the likelihood of conformity in adolescence as a whole. Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, how did your research question evolve as you moved through the research process?
I was actually able to keep my research question pretty consistent throughout the research process. Initially, I just researched family communication patterns in general, and the first thing that came up was the family communication patterns theory. And it gave me a list of all the factors that contribute to family communication patterns, and so I was able to expand on these and pick which particular factors I wanted to focus on throughout my research.
What additional questions emerged from your research? Why are these questions important?
So additionally, after focusing on the two factors, one being the type of communication, which positive was found to promote conformity, and the other being interpersonal relationships, I began to consider, like, would culture play a role into communication patterns? Because I didn't focus on that. I just focused on the types of communication. So I think culturally, if a family had different traditions or values, they might expect more of a child to conform rather than other cultures. So I would expand on that and further question that and research in the future.